You were told a lie about him. They told you he was the gloomy Dane, the depressed philosopher, the melancholy man with a Bible in one hand and a noose of self-pity in the other. They told you he was the father of existentialism, as if that explains anything. They told you he died sad and obscure, and that the world later realized he was important and that everything was sorted out in the end. None of that is true. Almost none of it. The man I want to talk about tonight was funny. He was sharp. He was rich until he chose not to be. He was deeply, painfully in love with one woman his entire life, and he destroyed that love himself on purpose. And then he wrote about it for 14 years in coded language only she would understand. He wore mismatched trousers because he forgot to dress properly, not because he was performing tragedy. He laughed often. He attended the theater. He drank coffee with so much sugar in the cup that the spoon could stand upright. And in the year 1846, in a small forgotten book that almost nobody read, he described, with terrifying precision, the exact world you are living in right now. The endless watching. The crowd that does not exist but rules everything. The leveling of every action into commentary about the action. The phantom he called the public. He saw your phone. He saw your feed. He saw your scrolling. He saw it 178 years before any of those things existed. His name was Søren Aabye Kierkegaard, and tonight, you and I are going to read his diary together. I am Mortimer Quill, and you are in the archive. The book sitting on the desk between us is bound in cracked black leather. The corners are worn through to the cardboard. The spine has been repaired 3 times, badly, with thread of 3 different colors. I pulled it from a sealed crate that arrived from a private collection in Copenhagen 40 years ago. The crate had not been opened. There was a customs label still attached. There was dust on the dust. Inside, 40,000 pages of journals, 22 volumes, the complete private writings of a man who lived 42 years and seems, somehow, to have written more words than many men who lived to 90. He kept everything: receipts, grocery lists, half-finished sentences, drafts of letters he never sent, drafts of letters he sent, then transcribed back into the journal afterward, in case he forgot what he had said. I read all of it. I will not pretend it was easy. I will not pretend I enjoyed every page. But I read it, friend, so that you do not have to. Because there is a thread running through those 40,000 pages, and the thread is this. He saw something nobody else could see. He tried to warn his city, his country, his century, and they laughed at him until he died. And the thing he saw is the thing you are doing right now, with your hand on a screen, watching me. Sit down. Move closer to the candle. The diary is open. Page 1. He was born on the 5th of May, 1813, in a tall, narrow house at number 2, Nytorv, in central Copenhagen. The house is still there. You can walk past it tomorrow if you like. There is a small plaque beside the door, and most tourists do not stop to read it. He was the 7th child, the last child. By the time he was old enough to remember anything, his mother was already a tired woman. By the time he was 21, 5 of those 7 children would be dead, and his mother would be dead too, and he would be alone in the house with his father and 1 surviving brother. The father is the key to everything. Without the father, there is no Søren Kierkegaard. Without the father, the diary on this desk does not exist. His name was Michael Petersen Kierkegaard. He had grown up poor on the heath of Jutland in the western part of Denmark, in a region so barren that even now you can drive across it for an hour and see nothing but heather and stone. He had been a shepherd boy, sent out alone with the family's small herd, in cold so deep that his fingers cracked open and bled into his gloves. One day, when Michael Petersen was about 12 years old, he stood on a hill on the heath, lifted his small bleeding fist toward the sky, and cursed God. He cursed God for the cold, for the hunger, for the silence, for the absence. He told God that he hated him. Then he walked back down the hill and continued tending the sheep. Within 5 years, Michael Pedersen had been taken in by an uncle in Copenhagen, learned the wool trade, opened his own shop, married well, married again after his first wife died, and become one of the wealthiest hosiers in the city. By the time Søren was born, the family lived in luxury. Servants, a library, fine clothes, fine food. The poor shepherd boy was now a respectable bourgeois gentleman. And he was certain, with a certainty so total that it warped every member of his family, that everything he had been given was a curse. That God had heard the boy on the hill. That God was waiting. That the wealth, the wife, the children, the house, the servants, all of it was the gift God gives before he takes everything away. When Søren was about 25 years old, walking on the heath with his father during a visit to the old country, the father told him this story. The whole story. The curse, the terror, the certainty that the family was damned. Søren wrote about it that night in his journal. He called it the Great Earthquake. He used those exact words. He said the great earthquake had revealed itself to him, and that everything in his life from that point forward was lived under its shadow. Friend, I want you to understand something about that moment. A father on a windswept hill telling a young son, everything you have, everything you are, everything you will ever do, is part of a divine punishment that began before you were born. Imagine carrying that. Imagine being 25 years old and discovering that your existence is collateral in a contract your father signed at 12 with God in fury on a hill. Most men would have rejected it, laughed, gone home, drunk wine, forgotten. Søren believed every word. And here is the strange and terrible thing. By the time the father told him the story, the family had already lost 5 children. Søren's mother was dead. His older sister Maren was dead. His sister Nicoline was dead. His sister Petrea was dead. His brother Søren Michael, his namesake, who had been kicked in the head by another boy in the schoolyard and never recovered, was dead. His brother Niels Andreas had run away to America in shame after failing his examinations and had died of yellow fever in Paterson, New Jersey at the age of 24. 5 children dead, the mother dead. Only Søren and his older brother Peter Christian remained. Søren did the math. He concluded that he and Peter Christian would both die before the age of 34, because 34 was the age of Christ when Christ died, and the family curse would not permit any Kierkegaard to outlive Jesus. He wrote this in the journal. He believed it for years. He arranged his life around it. He spent his father's money carelessly because he assumed he would not live to see 35. Peter Christian, by the way, did not die at 34. He lived to be 73. He became a bishop. He outlived Søren by 33 years. The curse, like most curses, was a story the family told itself to explain pain. But for the boy with the journal, the curse was real, and it shaped everything that came next. Now turn the page with me. We are in the year 1837. Søren is 24. He is studying theology at the University of Copenhagen, slowly, badly, without enthusiasm, mostly because his father insists. He has a small allowance. He spends most of it on books, coffee, and walking sticks. He owns, at one point, 63 walking sticks. I am not making that up. The household inventory after his death listed 63 walking sticks, 50 cups, and 3 umbrellas. The man liked objects. In May of that year, he attends a small social gathering at the home of a family friend, Peter Rordum, a young pastor with a household full of sisters. And there, sitting near the window, is a 14-year-old girl named Regine Olsen. Friend, before you raise your eyebrow at the age, remember the century. Remember that engagements at 14 and 15 were common in respectable Danish families of the period. Remember that nothing improper happened. Remember that Søren did not propose for 3 more years. He waited. He visited the family. He befriended the father. He slowly, carefully made himself a fixture in their lives. He was 24 when he met her. He was 27 when he asked for her hand. And on that day in May, when he first saw her sitting by the window, he wrote in the journal that something had happened to him that he did not understand. He wrote that her eyes were terrifying. That is the word he used, terrifying. Not beautiful, not enchanting, terrifying. He had looked into a pair of eyes and felt that his entire life was about to be rerouted. He was right. For 3 years, he circled her like a man circling a fire. He charmed her family. He made the father laugh. He sent the sisters small gifts. He performed, in the streets of Copenhagen, the role of the brilliant young intellectual that everyone expected him to become. He was charming. He was witty. He was a known figure in the cafes. He was, by every external measure, a young man heading toward a respectable bourgeois life. Theology degree, country pastorate, marriage, children, eventual quiet death in a small Danish town. And he watched Regine grow up. She turned 15. She turned 16. She turned 17. She had become, by every account that survives, an extraordinary young woman, lively, musical. She played the piano well. She read more than was thought proper for a girl of her class. She had, said one family friend later, a quality of attention so total that when she looked at you, you felt you had been seen for the first time in your life. On the 8th of September, 1840, Søren walked to the Olsen house, climbed the stairs, and proposed to Regine in the family parlor. She was 18. He was 27. She said yes. She said yes immediately. There was no hesitation. There was no negotiation. The girl by the window, who had terrified him 3 years before, simply said yes. He left the house in a state he could not describe. He walked the streets of Copenhagen for hours. He went home. He wrote in the journal. And then, friend, he wrote a sentence that historians have argued about for 170 years. He wrote, "I was old by then. I had been old for years, and she did not know it." What did he mean? He meant the curse. He meant the great earthquake. He meant the certainty that he was a damned man, the son of a damned man, carrying a darkness inside him that no 18-year-old girl with bright eyes and a piano should ever have to share. He meant that he had said yes to a marriage he already knew he would have to destroy. The engagement lasted 13 months. 13 months of agony in his journal. 13 months of letters he wrote to her and then did not send. 13 months of visits during which he tried, deliberately, methodically, to make her dislike him. He was cold to her in public. He missed appointments. He sent strange gifts. He said cruel things and then refused to apologize. He was building a case, in her mind, that he was a man unworthy of her love. Why? Because he had decided, friend, that if he simply broke off the engagement honorably, she would be marked for life as a rejected woman in a small Copenhagen society where rejected women did not easily recover. Whereas if he could make her hate him, make her see him as a monster, then she would be the one who had escaped. She would be the one with the moral authority. She would be free to marry well and forget him. It is one of the strangest and saddest acts of love I have ever read about. He destroyed her affection on purpose in order to free her, because he believed his own life was a curse he could not impose on another human being. And he documented every step of it in the journal, because some part of him needed a witness, even if the only witness was himself. In October of 1841, he returned the ring. He sent it back with a brief, cold letter. She came to the apartment. She begged him. She wept. She told him she would die without him. He pretended to laugh. He wrote in the journal that night that he had laughed in her face, and that he had then gone into the next room and laid on the floor and could not move for 2 hours. He left for Berlin within the month. He did not see her face again for nearly 14 years. Regine survived. That is the part of the story that almost nobody tells. She did not die. She did not collapse. She suffered badly for years. And then, slowly, she rebuilt her life. She married a man named Friedrich Schlegel, a respectable civil servant, kind and patient. They had a long marriage. They moved to the Danish West Indies, where Schlegel served as governor. She lived to be 82 years old. And every book Søren Kierkegaard wrote, every single one of the major works, every pseudonymous text, every philosophical treatise, every religious meditation was secretly, partially, sometimes entirely, addressed to Regine. He told his nephew before he died that she was the silent reader he had imagined for every page. He told his journal that he had loved her every day of his life. He left her, in his will, everything he owned, on the assumption that her husband had died first. When it became clear that her husband was alive, the will reverted to her family. She received nothing. She did not need to. She had received the books. In the diary on this desk, friend, there is a small folded paper near the back of one of the volumes. It is dated 1849, 8 years after the broken engagement. It is a single line, written in his small, careful hand. It says, "Today I saw her in the street. She nodded to me. I have been a happy man for 8 hours. 8 hours, from a single nod, after 8 years of silence. Take a breath, drink something. The candle is getting low. Let me trim it. There, better. Now, friend," we come to the book that almost nobody read, that almost nobody understood, that he himself dismissed as a minor work, a literary review, a piece of journalism. The book in which he predicted everything you are doing right now. 1846. He was 33 years old. He had survived the age of the family curse. He was beginning to suspect that he might actually live for a while. He had spent the years since the broken engagement in a torrent of writing, either or, fear and trembling, repetition, the concept of anxiety, philosophical fragments, stages on life's way, concluding unscientific postscript. Most of it published under invented names: Johannes de Silencio, Constantine Constantius, Vigilius Hoffniensis, Johannes Climacus. He hid behind these names like a man behind a hedge, watching readers walk past. And then he wrote a small book under his own name, 2 Ages, a literary review. The cover said it was a review of a novel that had been popular in Copenhagen, a romance about 2 generations of a Danish family, written by an older woman novelist. Most readers picked up the book expecting literary criticism. What they got, friend, was the future. He used the novel as a pretext. He used it the way a doctor uses a patient as a pretext to discuss disease. The novel became, in his hands, a sample, a specimen. From the specimen, he built a diagnosis. The diagnosis was about the entire age, about every age that would come after, about the age you are sitting in tonight. He said, there are 2 kinds of historical periods. There are ages of revolution, in which people act. They make decisions. They take risks. They commit themselves. They are wrong sometimes. They are violent sometimes. They are foolish often. But they move. They live forward. And then there are ages of reflection. In ages of reflection, people do not act. They watch. They comment. They consider every possible angle. They are not stupid. They are, in fact, often more intelligent than the people in ages of revolution. But the intelligence is paralyzed. The intelligence becomes its own substitute for action. To have thought about something deeply becomes equivalent in the reflective mind to having done something about it. The thinking replaces the doing. He said, we are living in an age of reflection. He said, in such an age, a strange new thing comes into being. He called it leveling. Leveling is the process by which every distinction is gradually flattened. Every great person is brought down. Every small person is lifted just enough to feel important. Everyone becomes a commentator. Nobody becomes a creator. The act of bringing down the great becomes itself a great pleasure, a sport, a daily entertainment. He said, leveling is the master passion of the reflective age. He said, leveling is performed by a thing that does not exist. He called this thing the public. He said the public is not a community. A community is a real group of real people in a real place with real responsibilities to one another. The public is something else. The public is an abstraction. The public is everyone and no one. The public is a phantom. The public has opinions, but cannot be held responsible for them. The public has tastes, but cannot be challenged about them. The public watches, but cannot itself be watched. He said, the public is created by the press. Friend, sit with that. He wrote those words in 1846. The Danish press of his time consisted of a handful of newspapers, a few magazines, a satirical weekly. There was no radio, there was no television, there was no internet, there were no algorithms, there were no platforms, there were no feeds. And he saw it. He saw the structure. He saw that whenever a medium begins to broadcast simultaneously to a large, undifferentiated audience, that audience begins to behave as a public, and the public begins to behave as a leveler, and the leveler begins to dissolve every meaningful distinction, and the result is an entire civilization that watches itself, watching itself, endlessly, without ever doing anything. He named the dynamic, he drew the diagram, and then he warned that it would only get worse, because the technology of the press would only get faster, and the audience would only get larger, and the public would only become more powerful, until eventually the public would be the only real political force in society, and every actual person would be reduced to a small voice trying to be heard above the roar of a crowd that does not exist. He was 33. He was sitting in a small apartment on Nørregade in Copenhagen. He had a single candle. He had a quill. And he saw the year 2024 with a clarity that nobody around him possessed. The book sold poorly, a few hundred copies. The reviewers said it was minor. The reviewers said it was, at best, an interesting curiosity, a strange digression by an eccentric young writer who should perhaps return to philosophy proper. One reviewer said the book was unreadable. One reviewer said the book was a piece of self-indulgence. One reviewer said nothing at all because he had not finished it. But within a few months of its publication, friend, something began to happen to Søren Kierkegaard that proved every word of his book correct. It began with a small Copenhagen weekly called The Corsair. The Corsair was a satirical paper run by a young man named Meyer Goldschmidt. It specialized in caricatures of public figures, in mocking little articles, in the sort of cruel humor that travels fastest in a small society where everyone knows everyone. The Corsair had, until 1846, treated Kierkegaard with respect. He was, in fact, one of the few major Copenhagen writers the paper had not attacked. Goldschmidt admired him. There had even been small, flattering pieces. And then, one of Kierkegaard's friends, a literary critic named Peter Ludwig Müller, attacked Kierkegaard in an annual literary almanac. The attack was a personal one. It mocked his pseudonymous writings. It mocked his appearance. It mocked his refusal to enter ordinary public life. Kierkegaard responded, and in his response, instead of merely defending himself, he made a decision that changed his life. He named Müller as a regular anonymous contributor to the Corsair, and he challenged Goldschmidt's paper to attack him publicly. He said, in print, "If you are going to mock me by name, in the open, where everyone can see. Stop hiding behind anonymous columns. Stop pretending you are a respectable journal. Be what you are." He was, in his own way, demanding integrity from a satirical paper. He was demanding that the public phantom show its face. The phantom showed its face. For most of the year 1846, almost every issue of the Corsair contained a caricature of Søren Kierkegaard. They drew him with one trouser leg shorter than the other. They drew his uneven shoulders. They drew his peculiar walk. They drew his hat at strange angles. They invented mocking nicknames. They published fake letters. They published fake quotations. They turned him, week by week, into a figure of public ridicule. And the city joined in. Children mocked him in the street. Adults pointed at him from across the road. Shopkeepers smirked when he came in to buy coffee. He could not walk anywhere in Copenhagen without seeing himself reflected back as a cartoon. The caricatures became, for many people in the city, more real than the man himself. He was no longer Søren Kierkegaard the writer. He was the funny, crooked man from the Corsair. This is, friend, the first documented mass cancellation campaign in modern history. It is not the only thing it is, but it is that. A small satirical platform turned its full attention on a single individual, week after week, for months, with the explicit goal of destroying his standing in society. And it worked. Or rather, it almost worked. He was wounded for the rest of his life. He stopped his daily walks for a long time. He withdrew from much of his social circle. He wrote in the journal that he could no longer think of Copenhagen the same way, that the city had become a kind of cage of mirrors in which every reflection was a distortion. But here's the thing about Søren Kierkegaard, friend, and this is why the diary on this desk matters, and this is why we are talking about him tonight. He did not stop writing. He did not retreat into silence. He did not change his work to please his attackers. He did not soften his ideas. He did not modernize his image. He did not, as we would say now, rebrand. He wrote more. He wrote harder. He wrote some of the deepest religious and philosophical work of the 19th century in the years immediately following the Corsair attack. The Sickness unto Death, Practice in Christianity, Works of Love, a long series of religious discourses. He turned the wound into a discipline, and he made a decision somewhere in those years that he was going to spend the rest of his life and the rest of his money telling the truth about what he saw, even if no living person agreed with him, even if every living person mocked him, even if he died alone in the gutter for it. Which, almost exactly, is what happened. The candle is low again. Let me light a second one. There. The archive is cold tonight. Now, friend, the leap. You have heard the phrase. Everyone has heard the phrase. The leap of faith. It is on inspirational posters. It is in self-help books. It is in motivational speeches. It is the kind of phrase that has been used so many times that the meaning has been worn smooth. A leap of faith. A brave plunge into uncertainty. A decision to trust without proof. The phrase is everywhere. Søren Kierkegaard never wrote those exact words, not in that order, not in that form. The phrase, in the simple form you know it, is a translation distortion that hardened over 100 years of careless quotation. What he wrote about, friend, was the leap, the qualitative leap, and he meant something more disturbing than the inspirational poster suggests. He said, there are two kinds of changes in human life. There are quantitative changes in which something gradually becomes more or less of itself. A man who walks 1 mile, then 2, then 3, has made a quantitative change. He has more walking. He is the same man, walking more. And there are qualitative changes in which something becomes a different kind of thing entirely. A man who is single, then engaged, then married, has not just had more relationship, he has become a different kind of man. He is now under obligations he was not under before. He is now responsible for another life. The change is not larger, the change is different. Kierkegaard said, every important moment in a human life is a qualitative leap, and every qualitative leap requires a decision, and every decision must be made without proof, because if there were proof, it would not be a decision, it would be a calculation, it would be an arithmetic, it would not be your life. He was not, friend, talking only about religious faith. That is the distortion. That is the simplification that the inspirational posters performed on him. He was talking about every commitment that defines a human existence. The choice of a vocation, the choice of a partner, the choice of a city, The choice of what you will refuse to do for money. The choice of what you will refuse to say, even when everyone is saying it. Every one of these choices, he said, is a leap. Every one of them is made on the edge of a cliff with no certainty about the ground below. And he said something even more uncomfortable. He said, there is no safe ground. There is no version of your life in which you do not have to leap. Even refusing to leap is a leap. Even staying in place is a decision made without proof. The man who refuses to commit, who keeps his options open, who waits for more information, who studies the situation, who reflects, who considers, who discusses, who consults, that man is not avoiding the leap. He is making the leap into a life of permanent reflection. He has chosen, by not choosing, to live in the age of reflection forever. This, friend, is the diagnosis underneath the diagnosis. Two ages described the leveling civilization. The leap describes why the leveling civilization is so seductive. Because in a leveled civilization, you never have to leap. You can always reflect. You can always comment. You can always defer. You can always wait for more information. And you can convince yourself your entire life that you are being responsible, that you are being thoughtful, that you are being careful. But you are not being careful. You are dying without ever having lived. He wrote that, friend. In a journal entry from 1848, he wrote, "Most men live in a kind of shadow of themselves, never quite committing, never quite refusing, drifting through their existence as the public drifts through history. And at the end, they die in their beds, wondering vaguely why nothing ever became real to them." Look at me, friend. Look at the candle. Are you, right now, watching this video instead of doing something else? Yes, of course you are. We both know it. He saw you. He saw this exact moment. He described it. I am not telling you to turn off the video. The candle is lit. You are here. We will finish. But understand, he is not a museum piece. He is not a quaint 19th century philosopher we visit out of historical curiosity. He is a witness. And the testimony he is giving from the page of this diary is testimony about you. Move on. The next page. By 1854, friend, Søren Kierkegaard was no longer the same man. The Corsair years had hardened him. The constant writing had exhausted him. He had spent almost the entirety of his father's inheritance, a fortune that should have lasted 3 lifetimes, on printing his own books, paying for editions nobody bought, financing his small private war against the comfortable Christianity of his time. Because, friend, that was the war he had decided to fight. Not against Christianity itself. He never abandoned Christianity. He went to his death believing every word of the Gospels with a literal severity that would shock most Christians today. The war was against what Denmark had done to Christianity. He believed that the Danish state church had taken the most demanding teaching in human history, the teaching that you must love your enemies, that you must give away your wealth, that you must follow a crucified man into a life of voluntary suffering, and turned it into a comfortable bourgeois ritual conducted by salaried civil servants on Sunday mornings, after which everyone went home to a nice lunch. He believed this was not Christianity. He believed it was the opposite of Christianity. He believed it was, in fact, the most dangerous lie a society could tell itself, because it allowed people to feel they were Christians while doing nothing that any actual Christian had ever done. And in 1854, an event occurred that allowed him to make the war public. Bishop Jacob Münster, the most respected churchman in Denmark, the man who had been the spiritual advisor to Søren's own father, the bishop who had baptized Søren himself, died. At the funeral, his successor, Hans Lassen Martensen, delivered a eulogy in which he called Münster a witness to the truth. A witness in the New Testament sense, a martyr, one of a long line of holy men stretching back to the apostles. Søren read the published version of the eulogy. He sat at his desk. He picked up his quill. and he began to write the most furious, sustained, single-handed assault on a national church that any individual writer has ever conducted. He wrote, "Minster was not a witness to the truth. Minster was a comfortable bishop in a comfortable city who lived in a comfortable house, who was paid a comfortable salary, who preached comfortable sermons to comfortable people, and who died in a comfortable bed. There is nothing wrong with any of that. There is everything wrong with calling it martyrdom. The apostles were tortured. The early Christians were thrown to lions. To put a salaried Copenhagen bishop in the same category is not piety. It is blasphemy. It is the greatest possible insult to every actual martyr who ever actually died for the actual truth." He published this under his own name in a major Copenhagen newspaper. He named Martinsen. He named the bishop. He named the system. Martinsen did not respond personally. He sent a clerical underling to write a brief, dignified rebuttal in another paper. The rebuttal said, essentially, "This man Kierkegaard is well known to be eccentric, perhaps not entirely well, and we should not be drawn into a public quarrel with him." Kierkegaard replied. He took out the rest of his money. He started his own pamphlet series. He called it The Moment, Øjeblikket, the blink of an eye, the instant of decision, the unit of time in which a leap occurs. He published 9 numbers of The Moment between May and September of 1855. He wrote them himself, edited them himself, paid for them himself, distributed them himself. Each one was a hand grenade. He attacked the salaries of the clergy. He attacked the comfort of the parsonages. He attacked the careers of bishops. He attacked the entire structure of state-funded Christianity. He said, in plain Danish, that no one in the entire Danish state church was a Christian in any meaningful sense, including himself, and including, especially, those who claimed most loudly to be Christians. He was 42 years old. He was almost out of money. He had been writing, more or less continuously, for 15 years. He had not slept properly in months. He weighed less than he should. The doctors who later examined him would describe a man whose body had been used up. On the 2nd of October, 1855, he was carrying a small sum of money, his last withdrawal from his bank, walking home from the bank along a Copenhagen street when he simply collapsed. He fell sideways onto the cobblestones. People came. They thought he had fainted. He could not stand. He could not walk. He was carried to Frederick's Hospital. He would never leave it. The hospital records survive, friend. They are dry and clinical in the way hospital records are. They say that the patient was admitted unable to use his legs, that he had partial paralysis spreading upward, that his speech was clear but his breath was short, that he was lucid throughout the 41 days of his stay. Lucid. 41 days. He had time, friend. He had time to think. His brother Peter Christian came to visit. Søren refused to see him. They had quarreled years before about the church war, and Søren had never forgiven him for choosing the comfortable side. The brother stood outside the door. The door did not open. The brother left. His old friend Emil Boesen came to visit, almost daily. Boesen was a pastor, but a friend before he was a pastor. Boesen sat with him. They talked for hours. Boesen, thank God, took notes. We have those conversations. They are the closest thing we have to a final testament from Søren Kierkegaard. Boesen asked him, "Do you want to receive communion? It would be a comfort. It is the proper thing." Søren said, "Yes, but not from a priest." Boesen said, "There is no other way to receive it. Only an ordained priest can administer the sacrament." Søren said, "Then I will not receive it. The priests are civil servants. The civil servants have nothing to do with the truth. I will not have the truth administered to me by a civil servant." Boesen said, "But I am a priest. I am also your friend. Will you receive it from me?" Søren said, "You are my friend, but you are also a civil servant. I am sorry, Emil. I cannot." He died without communion, friend. The most religious man in Copenhagen, the man who had spent his entire fortune defending Christianity from Denmark, refused the central sacrament of his church on his deathbed because he refused to take it from a state employee. It is one of the most consistent acts in the history of belief. He went to his death walking the line he had drawn. He did not flinch. Boson also asked him, "Are you afraid?" Søren said, "No, I am tired. I want to go up." Those were among his last clear sentences. "I want to go up." He repeated it several times in the final days. The doctors thought it might be a delirium. Boson did not. Boson wrote in his notes that Søren had said it with a small smile, the way a man speaks of going home. On the 11th of November, 1855, at 9 o'clock in the evening, Søren Aabye Kierkegaard died. He was 42 years old. The cause of death was listed as paralysis of unknown origin with associated complications. Modern medical historians have suggested Pott's disease, late effects of a childhood spinal injury, possibly tubercular. We will not know for certain. The body of Søren Kierkegaard rests in the Assistens Cemetery in Copenhagen. You can find the grave. The marker is modest. He did not want a large stone. The funeral, friend, was the final irony. The state church, the church he had spent his last year and his last money attacking, buried him with full state church ceremony. They had the legal right. He was a baptized member of the Danish state church. They controlled all the cemeteries. There was no other way for a body to be buried in Copenhagen. His nephew, a young law student named Henrik Lund, attended the funeral. He stood at the graveside as the official priest read the official prayers over the man who had refused those prayers from his deathbed. And when the priest finished, Henrik Lund, a private citizen, a relative, a man with no clerical authority, stepped forward and read aloud to the assembled mourners a passage from the book of Revelation about the lukewarm being spit out of the mouth of God. He then read aloud one of Søren's own passages from the moment, attacking the very church that was conducting the funeral. There was a small scandal. The newspapers wrote about it. Henrik Lund was nearly prosecuted for disrupting an official ceremony. Eventually, the matter was dropped. But the scandal, friend, was the only honest moment in the entire burial. The nephew did, at the grave, what the uncle had asked of every Christian for 15 years. He refused the comfortable lie, in public, at cost to himself. Søren would have liked that. There is no record of whether he predicted it. I think he did. I think on some quiet morning in the hospital, lying paralyzed and lucid, he imagined exactly that scene, and he smiled, and he said again the thing he had been saying for 40 days. I want to go up. Take a moment. Friend, stand up if you need to. Walk to the window. The archive will wait. The diary will not close until you return. Now. The meta twist. For about 50 years after his death, Søren Kierkegaard was almost completely unknown outside Denmark and a few small theological circles in Germany. His books were not translated. His ideas were not discussed. His name appeared, occasionally, in footnotes. Most educated Europeans of the late 19th century would not have recognized the name. And then something happened that he could not have predicted and that he would have hated. He was discovered. He was translated. He was imported. He was, friend, made into a movement. The first wave was the German theologians of the early 20th century. Karl Barth, Rudolf Bultmann, Paul Tillich. They read Kierkegaard, they recognized what he had done, and they used him to rebuild Protestant theology after the catastrophe of the First World War. This was, on the whole, fair. They quoted him correctly. They argued with him honestly. They did not pretend he was something he was not. The second wave was worse. The second wave was the existentialists, Jean-Paul Sartre, Albert Camus, Martin Heidegger. They took Kierkegaard's vocabulary, anxiety, despair, the leap, the absurd, authenticity, and they pulled the religious heart out of every word. They kept the words, they threw away the God. They handed Western intellectual culture a Kierkegaard who was deeply concerned with anxiety and despair and authentic choice, but who had, somehow, mysteriously, absolutely nothing to say about Jesus Christ. This is, friend, like writing a biography of Beethoven that mentions only his cooking. It is technically true, it misses everything. The third wave was the worst of all. The third wave was the popularizers, the self-help authors, the motivational speakers, the greeting card industry. They took Kierkegaard's leap and turned it into the leap of faith you know from inspirational posters. They took his concept of the individual and turned it into a justification for self-absorbed personal branding. They took his fierce ethical demands and turned them into wellness aphorisms. They took the man who attacked the comfortable bourgeoisie and made him into bedtime reading for the comfortable bourgeoisie. And here, friend, is the final terrible joke. The man who diagnosed the public, the abstraction, the leveling crowd, the phantom that does not exist but rules everything, was processed after his death by the public. He became content. He became quotations on social media. He became a name dropped in podcasts. He became, in your century, exactly the sort of cultural object he had spent his life warning against. The leveling worked on him too. It always works. It is what it does. But here's the thing about Søren Kierkegaard, friend. The thing you cannot take away from him, no matter how many inspirational posters you make. The thing the self-help books cannot dilute and the existentialists cannot strip and the public cannot quite absorb. He saw it coming. He wrote it down. The diary on this desk is the proof. Page after page of a man alone in a Copenhagen apartment with one candle and one quill and one engagement ring he could not return to its owner, looking forward through 178 years and seeing with terrible clarity the world you have built. He saw your scrolling. He saw your watching. He saw your endless reflection without action. He saw the public you serve and the public that watches you. He saw the leveling that pulls down anyone who tries to act, anyone who tries to commit, anyone who tries to leap. He saw all of it. And he wrote, in the margin of one of these pages, I am looking at it now, a single small line in faded ink. He wrote, the only protection against the public is the individual who has the courage to be one. That is the answer, friend. That is the line in the diary. That is what he wanted to leave behind. The protection is not a movement. The protection is not a platform. The protection is not a manifesto. The protection is not a hashtag or a community or a brand or a podcast or a like or a share. The protection is the daily, painful, unglamorous work of being one specific human being in one specific place with one specific set of obligations, who acts, who decides, who leaps, who fails, who acts again, and who refuses every day to dissolve into the comfortable phantom called everyone. He was that for 42 years, with a broken engagement and a wounded back and a city that mocked his trousers. He was that, friend. He was an individual. And in a leveling civilization, that is the most subversive thing a human being can be. Now look at me, friend. Look at the candle. The diary is closing. I am going to slide something across the desk to you. Reach out. There, take it. It is small. It is silver. It is broken. It is the engagement ring he returned to Regine Olsen on that cold October day in 1841. The ring she gave back to him when she came to the apartment to beg. The ring that sat, for the rest of his life, in a small velvet box at the back of his writing desk while he pretended he had thrown it away. How did the archive get it? Do not ask me that. The archive gets what it gets. There are rules I do not write and cannot break. Take it, friend. He does not need it anymore. You might. Put it somewhere you will see it. On a shelf, on a desk, in a drawer you open every morning. And when you find yourself, 6 months from now, scrolling through something you do not remember choosing to scroll through, watching a thing you did not choose to watch, dissolving slowly into a public that does not exist, look at the ring. Remember that he saw you. Remember that he tried to warn you. Remember that the protection against the public is the courage to be one specific human being. To leap, to act, to commit, to refuse the comfortable phantom. The candle is almost gone, friend. He saw your phone coming. 178 years before it arrived, he sat in a Copenhagen apartment with one candle and one quill, and he saw you. He sat there, friend, in the dark, and he wrote the warning. He sent it forward. It arrived. The diary closes. The archive cools. You may go, but the ring stays with you. He is, in his quiet way, still watching you scroll. Good night, friend. I will see you again, in the next file, in the next candle, in the next room of the archive. The door is never locked. You always come back. You always do.